Hey guys, so in today's video we're going to be going over list methods. We're first going to start off with going how to add items to a list, and then we're also going to go into figuring out how to remove items from a list, and then we'll continue on from there. So let's go ahead and start by creating a list. Let's go ahead and call a variable my list, and we'll go ahead and set it equal to a bunch of integers. And then let's go ahead and print my list. We're going to go ahead and print that. What happens is obviously we're getting my list. Now let's say hypothetically that you wanted to be able to add an item to your list. What you could do is you could always say new list equals my list dot append, and then we'll go ahead and add 8. So if we were to print this, what would happen is we would get 8 added onto my list. Now, what do you think would happen if we were to go ahead and print new list? Would it print out the same list as my list? If ever you're confused, obviously go ahead and run the code. So let's go ahead and print new list. Let's go ahead and run that. And what we get is none. So what's happening here is as you work through these, as we work through each of these methods, you're going to go ahead and learn that not all the methods actually do what we kind of want them to do, or like what we expect them to do. For example, what's happening here is rather than actually saying my list will be appended to it, like rather than doing something with it, all it does is it adds 8 to the list itself. So even though we have the variable new list equal to this, all that's really happening is the list is adding the 8 onto the end of the list itself. And that's why you're getting a none right here. Now this might seem confusing at first, but eventually you'll kind of pick up on it the more that you work with lists and list methods. Next, what we're going to go ahead and work on is the insert method. Now the insert method will go ahead and insert any item into the list, and it'll go ahead and insert it into your desired position. So for example, let's go ahead and get rid of this, and let's actually do, instead of append, we'll go ahead and do dot insert. And we say, let's say we want to insert 8 at the first index, so we'll start at 0. So now if we were to print my list, and let's get rid of that, my list, and if we were to go ahead and print that, what would happen is 8 would be added at the beginning of the list itself. What happens with insert is wherever you want to go ahead and insert an item into the list, it'll go ahead and insert it into the index, the start of wherever you really want your object to go ahead and be inserted into. So if, for example, we wanted to say let's go ahead and copy this, and then let's go ahead and print out another one. Let's say we want a 9, but we want a 9 at the index of 7. Let's go ahead and run that. Is we would go ahead and add 9 now to the index of 7, which would be right here. And we still have 8 at 0. And then obviously you count up 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So we start at 0 and then count up. And next we'll go ahead and come up to the .extend method. Now what extend will do is it'll go ahead and add items onto the end of the list itself. So let's actually create a second list. So we'll call this my list 2. And then we'll go ahead and say this equals apples, oranges, and then we'll go ahead and say let's do a Boolean value of true. And then let's go ahead and get rid of these. And then let's say, for example, if you wanted to use the .extend method, what we would do is we would do my list .extend, and then we do my list 2. And then if we were to go ahead and print my list, what we would get is we would go ahead and get the list that would extend on top of the second list. So obviously, as you can see right here, we have the first list, the integers, and then we have some string values as well as a Boolean value go ahead and attached to the end of the list. So just kind of as a quick recap, the .append we'll go ahead and append or add an item to the list itself. Likewise, insert, we'll go ahead and insert an item into like any of the indexes, and then it'll add whatever that item it is. So again, if you're at index 0, you could go ahead and add 5 to the index of 0. And then finally extend, we'll go ahead and extend or add the additional list to the first list. It's very similar to the zip function, but I'll go ahead and go over zip in another video. So kind of when working with append and extend, the difference between the two is the .append adds an element at the end of the list, whereas the .extend adds the element of a list or an iterable to the end of the current list. So go ahead and play around with this code, and I'll actually add some exercises for you to kind of get the hang of .append, .extend in the GitHub. That I'll go ahead and link in the description. And likewise, I'll go ahead and link a really great valuable source that you guys can reference for working with lists and trying to figure out really .append and .extend. The best way to learn is obviously to go ahead and work through it. So with that said, we'll go ahead and move on to how to remove items from a list. So let's go ahead and begin with the .pop method. And .pop is going to be one of those that will go ahead and return a value. So remember when I said .append, like when I set it to a variable, for example, new list equals my list .append, and how the append method isn't actually returning a value. All it's doing is it's adding the value itself to the item or to the list that we're going ahead and affecting. .pop will actually be one of those methods that will return a value. Of all of these methods right here that we have in add and remove, the .pop will go ahead and return a value such as 5 or whatever we want to pop off of the list. So when I say .pop, what's happening is, for example, if we do new list, and we're going to go ahead and set it equals to my list, and we're going to go ahead and do .pop. What's going to happen is the .pop will go ahead and return the end of value on the list itself. So if we were to go ahead and print this, what would happen is we would get 7. That's because 7 is being popped off, and we're going to go ahead and have the new list will be equals to, or to be bound to the value of the index of the integer 7. Now, if we were to go ahead and actually go ahead and say do a mylist.pop again, and if we were to go ahead and print out my list, what would happen is now we would have not only 7 popped off, but we would also have 6 popped off. So .pop will go ahead and pop off each item for however many times you call the .pop method. And likewise, you can always save the new, like the item itself that's being popped off to a variable because it's holding the value itself. It's popping off 6, so it's saying we're going to collect 6, and we're going to take it away from the list itself. So when working with .pop, we can go ahead and obviously pop off the end 2 items. And likewise, let's say we wanted to be able to pop off the index of 0. What would happen is, rather than popping off 6 right here, what would happen is it would go ahead and pop off 1. So you can always declare, if you will, which index you want to have popped off of the original list. So that's just kind of the .pop method. And so now we'll go ahead and move on to the last 2 items, or the last 2 methods, and that will be the .remove and the .clear. I have these 2 up here, the new list, just to show that the list will actually, just to remind myself actually, that list, a variable will be held, will hold the value of the .pop, whereas new list, which is a variable, will not hold the value of remove. Again, of all of these, the .pop will return the value because it's popping off the value from the list. So I'll go ahead and remove these 2, and then we'll move on to .remove and .clear. Now remove will remove the actual value itself. So if, for example, we were to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and say my list dot remove, and then let's go ahead and say let's remove the integer 4. If we were to go ahead and print this, what would happen is we'd have the list printed out except for 4. And then now, just to show another example, let's go ahead and create like a new list, new variable, and then we'll do my list dot remove, and then we'll go ahead and say 4. Now if we were to print the my list again, oops, we would obviously be popping off the same, or removing the same item. Let's actually change this to 6. So if we were to go ahead and run that again, so what's happening here is we're removing 4, and then we're removing also 6, but because we're removing 6, it's not actually like returning the value itself. So just remember with .pop, that one will hold the value, whereas remove will just remove the value from the list itself. Again, you'll obviously catch on in time, and hopefully with me saying this enough repetition will set in so you'll be able to remember that. So the remove method will remove the item from the list. And now finally, that brings us to the .clear method. So what .clear will do is it'll clear the list itself. So if we were to say my list .clear, what would happen is we'd have the list removed like of all values and of all items. So if, for example, we were to say new list, again, we're going back to holding values and why this will return none. So for example, we set this variable to mylist.clear, and if we were to actually print the new list, what would happen is we'd get none. So again, all that's happening is once we call, or like once we say we want this item or this this method to go ahead and be activated, all that's happening right now is the list itself is clearing, and no value is actually being returned. That's why we're having kind of none shown right here. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I'll go ahead and link additional exercises. I'll go ahead and add it to the end of this code that I have. I'll send it on my GitHub so you guys, and I'll provide a link in the description for you guys to go ahead and work on each of these to get a little more practice and hopefully solidify your knowledge here. Likewise, again, I'm going to go ahead and link another, I guess, website that will go ahead and explain each of the methods, and it's actually really quite straightforward, and I really like this website. So yeah, so I'll go ahead and link those both in the description. So again, hopefully you guys learned a little bit more about Python programming and how to add and remove items within a list. I'll go ahead and follow up this video with another video of how to work with different methods and using the zip function within a list, but I feel that the add and remove will be enough for you guys to like just take it in one sitting. So hopefully you learned a little bit more. If you like, please feel free to check out some of my other videos where I do go into Python programming. And otherwise, I want to thank you for watching this, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.